Okay, let's see. Let's Terraform CI/CD and testing on AWS. If anybody is watching this at some point in time, I am just doing a workshop. All right, let's see what we're going to get into here. So in this workshop, we're going to look at some Terraform modules, leverage the Terraform test framework to validate functionality of the modules. We're going to create a CI/CD pipeline on AWS. It looks like we're going to do code commit, code build, code pipeline, Docker, and checkoff. Okay. And yep, those are all the services. Let's go next through this. All right, we already know what Terraform is, so we're not going to look at that. And our software testing, yes. So we'll do some linting, some formatting. We'll run some security tests, some unit tests, contract tests, integration tests, end-to-end tests. Okay. And we know what DevOps is and what CI/CD is. Okay. Okay, yep. So in 1.6.0 of Terraform, they introduced the Terraform testing framework, and that's what we're going to work with in this workshop. Okay. All right, let's get started. We are going to say that we're going to pretend we're at an event. And yeah, I don't need to go through all of this to get in because I already have it right here. I'm already in. Already in. Okay. All right. So the first thing that we need to do is modify our EC2 IAM role. Okay, I don't know why this doesn't show up in the stream, but maybe it will now. Let's try and share the screen again. Ah, there we go, entire screen. Screen number 2, share, put you back up there. Okay. There we go. Okay, so let's go modify our EC2 IAM role. And if anybody is following along, I'm just going to explain what's happening here. When the workshop was initiated, it created a Cloud9 instance. I don't access Cloud9 from my EC2 instances, but the Cloud9 instance runs on EC2. And what I want to have happen is, since I'm going to be deploying Terraform from the EC2 instance, I want to make sure that the EC2 instance is using a role that gives it permission to apply the Terraform wherever I need it to apply. So I'm not going to use the managed credentials that Cloud9 initially comes with. So what I need to do is in my instance here, I can right click on it and I'm going to go to security and I'm going to change my IAM role. And it's got a Cloud9 instance profile that's automatically applied to it. But I'm going to change this to one that's been created for me. It's the Terraform Workshop Cloud9 instance profile. And that'll have all the permissions in it that are going to let me do whatever I need to do. Okay, so now that that's done and we modified that role, we're going to go into Cloud9 and set up our environment there. And let's just do that. So I can just come up here to the search for Cloud9. Let's go into Cloud9. We're going to open the IDE. Okay. We're going to come up here to our settings, our preferences. I'm going to go down to AWS settings, and I do not want to use these manage temporary credentials. Okay. And then we've got a command we can actually run, and I think I could just copy it from down here. So we're going to run this AWS CLI command from the Cloud9 instance and get our identity to see if it's using the right role. Okay, so let's come on over here. And let's paste that. And we are using the right role. Okay. That's what I expected. Nothing too crazy. Okay, we're going to clone the Git repo. That's done. We got our Git repo here now. And we're going to resize our EBS volume to 60 gig. It's like 20 something right now. So we'll go in and resize it. And there we go, modify it. Yeah, it was like 26. Yeah, okay. So that's good. All right. Now that that's done, we're going to set up Homebrew, Terraform, TFNV, and Chekhov. So let's do that. So there's a setup script that the workshop is already providing for me. And so that's what I'm just running that. I'm going to run that setup script. I'm giving it permissions to execute, and then I'm going to run it. So let's run it. And this should install everything that I need. And that setup script is right here. So installs Terraform, TFNV, Chekhov. Yeah. The last time I ran through this workshop, I didn't finish it, but my setup failed. And then I had to go back in and run it again because I think it was because of the permissions I had, but we'll see. See if we can make this any bigger. That's better. Okay, once this is all done, it'll say setup finished, and then I can do some verifications. All right, setup finished successfully. Let's go ahead and okay, so what happened is I think I saw this in here before. Yeah. So now my brew should work. There we go. Yeah, so I just had to update the path. Right. Okay. TFE and V's there. Terraform is good. And then check off. Good to go. All right, so we've set up our Cloud9 environment and everything looks good. This is required because testing functionality. So, okay. If it's not 1.6 for Terraform or later, I need to force it to use it. So Terraform was 183. We're going to be okay. All right, so let's move on. Now we're looking at our local Terraform module development and testing. And what we're going to do here is create a custom Terraform module. And we're going to test the security and functionality of the module locally with that Terraform test framework and checkoffs. Okay, so let's move on to that. So creating input variables, provider, local values, and data sources. So we've got a bunch of input variables. We've got our data sources. So we're going to start out, we're going to remove our Git configuration. All right, so we got rid of the existing Git configuration. We're going to go into Terraform config modules, module-aws-tf-cicd. So it's here under Terraform config, module-aws. Yeah. And we want to open the variables.tf. Okay. So the way this workshop is set up, the files are here, but they're empty. Now, this is going to be our input variables, and they've created the file nicely for me. And let's see, what can we glean if we look through this? So we've got our variables. And then you'll notice, okay, so these are just conditional logic variables. These are for code commit. Here's code build variables. You'll notice that some of these have validation built into them. Okay. Yep, so validation. There's our S3 variables. Terraform remote state resources for code commit. Okay. So I'm not going to go through the whole file, but we're going to take that and we're going to drop it in here and save it. And that creates our variables file. Okay, the variables file contains all the input variables that the module that we're creating is going to accept. Does have some advanced features to dynamically create multiple resources with similar configurations. And it says we'll see this if we look at the code commit repos, code build project, and code pipelines variables. So code commit repos. Let's find that. So here's code commit repos. Okay. So repository name, description, default branch tags. Yeah. And we're mapping and validating. Okay. Very good. Next, we need to create our data.tf file, and that's going to define our region. So let's come back over here. Let's get the data.tf file. Let's drop that in. Gets our current AWS region. Next, we're going to do the same with our IAM file. And this looks like it's setting up our trust relationships. And check off stuff. So it's data sources, resources, and input variables to create resources for IAM. Terraform only create this resource if the variable create code pipeline service role is set to true. If you recall from creating the variables TF file in this module, the default value for that variable is true, which means the resource will be created. Okay. So let's do our IAM. Drop that in there and save it. Save it. Save it. We're going to create our S3 file. Drop in our S3 code. Code pipeline artifacts bucket. Okay. This is where our S3 resources are defined. It includes things like our S3 bucket. The code pipeline is going to put the artifacts in. Iterate over the items in a collection for each for our code pipeline null. saying that for each pipeline defined in the code pipelines variable, as long as the variable is not null, it'll create resources corresponding to each pipeline. Yeah. For each, right here. Okay. Very good. Now we're going to do the code commit Terraform file. Okay, and this is creating our code commit repo. We're going to save that. Make sure I save that one. We're going to create our code build file. Code build projects. So this is going to create our code build projects. I get the code build. Again, using the for each meta argument. And then we're going to create our code pipeline. And save it. Okay, now we're going to do our back end. Now for the back end, this is where the Terraform state is going to be saved, S3 and DynamoDB. And we're again using the for each. So this is going to be our back end file. And then we want outputs. Let's put that one together. Okay. All right, so now we're going to do our tests. We're going to go to the test directory and open the main test file. That's right here. And we don't have any tests, so we need to create them. All right, so let's see what we're doing. We're setting up our provider, US East 1, setting up our global testing variables. Test code build projects, test code pipelines, run the framework, run Chekhov, test the remote state sources, do the unit input validation, unit tests. All right. Okay, so as long as it ends with .hcl, it's a valid test file. It needs to be put into a test folder or a test directory that's in the same directory as the Terraform configuration files that we want to test. And we have the provider configuration portion of it, the variables block, and then the run block. So we have the command that Terraform uses when we run it, and then the assertions. What are we checking? All right, so let's drop that test in. Save it. Example of a unit test. All right. And then we're going to test it. And we'll go back through. All right. So now we're in the module directory. We need to initialize Terraform. So it'll initialize the back end and it will make sure it reads that module in. That's good. And then we're going to run the test. And let's see what we get. So the input validation passed. And our end-to-end test passed. Okay, so our test passed. And we've now used the Terraform test framework. I'm going to pause the live here, and when I come back live, we'll walk through what this module does.